Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Hey, thanks for jumping on. It's so great to meet you.
Oh, great.
Where do you live?
Toronto.
Toronto. Okay, cool. I'm in Philly.
Yeah. Philly's the one American city that I want to go to that I've not been to.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting.
I think I'm going to come in the summer. I have friends living there now. I've never been. It's the one big American city that I want to go to that I've never been to.
Well,
Everyone loves it. Everyone
it's,
raves
it,
about it.
it has such a syndrome because it's between New York and Washington, right? So you got like
Right.
the financial capital above us, you got the political capital below us.
Right.
It's literally like a short train ride from each. So it kind of gets lost a little. It kind of gives the people the attitude, but amazing restaurants, like phenomenal
Yeah.
restaurants. Museums are awesome. The Barnes Foundation I like it better than the Orsay Museum in Paris, like the Barnes
Really?
Foundation.
Wow.
Like hundreds of Renoirs, Van Goghs, like Cézannes. Like it's stunning. What I'll do is when we're all done, I'll give you a top 10 list of things you got to see when you
Oh,
finally
beautiful.
make it.
Yeah.
I'll give you a checklist.
Email me.
Yeah. So my introduction to your work, Ryan Holiday mentioned you. I'm a big fan of Ryan. He mentioned on Writing and Failure. He mentioned the book. He does like a book list each month, like what he's reading. And
Right.
I downloaded the Audible and just loved it. It was so good. So good.
Oh, great.
I was hoping maybe we could talk about on writing and failure, and also too maybe you could touch on how not to fuck up your marriage too bad.
Sure.
Something like that. That'd be great. And
Yeah.
I love I do a lot of walks and took pages of notes on the writing and failure book. I just loved it. Cool. We'll get started. And there's like 50, 60 minutes to work for you right now.
Sure. Perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's go. I appreciate it. And your last name, Marche? Marche?
It's Marche. It was originally
Marche.
Marcheschi. It was an Italian name. It was changed. But I always thought, like, why didn't you go all the way and just change it to M-A-R-S, like, make my life easier? But, no. So now I've got a name that sounds French-Canadian that is Italian, whatever.
I'm going to struggle with this because my mom is a Marchese. So all my cousins, yeah. And so I grew up in a world of Marcheses. So I look at it and I want to say Marchese every time I see your name. So can you say it one more time just so my brain can process it?
Marsh like a swamp.
Oh, really? Okay. That is not Italian sounding.
No.
Are you all Italian or what's the
it's about half.
Okay. That's Sicilian.
But I mean, I'm a mutt. We're like mutts from Western Canada. There's everything in there.
And the Marchese, that's a very Sicilian name.
It's Marcheschi.
A Marcheschi, okay.
I mean, look at these eyes. Like, this is from like right outside of Lucca. It's
yeah, sure, in Tuscany, sure.
Yeah, in Tuscany, yeah. So that's where I went back to the village where they're all from, Colle di Capito, and everyone looked like my Uncle Art. It was the fucking weirdest thing ever. I mean, they really did. Like it was, yeah. And of course, the name was like they sold this, like everything was Marcheschi. There was like literally it's like Tuscany, so it's like wine. There's a castle. There's like vineyards everywhere. There's like people out hunting boar. There's like these fabulous little restaurants and so on. And I was like, why the fuck did they ever leave this place? For Alberta. For like, like Western Canada, like rough. Right. And then I saw like guys paving the roads and I was like, that's why.
That's why
I'd be doing that now. I wouldn't be living up in the fucking castle with the vineyards. I'd be shoveling shit on the side of the road.
There would be no pen or computer in your hand. You'd have a shovel or an axe or something. Oh my God.
Exactly. It wouldn't be like interviews about my latest book.
We're a couple of years back, we're in Sicily at the town where the Marcheses are from, and it's called Shaka. And we're sitting there at the port, and they brought us to the port where, like 100 years ago, like my great grandfather left to go to Philadelphia. And we're like, why the fuck did he leave this place? And you turn around to the mountains and the vineyards and the wine.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what are you thinking?
Yeah, but they had really good reasons.
They did. They had nothing going on there.
I mean, like we're sitting here talking. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, they had their reasons. Like, I don't think it was a mistake.
No, it was not. No, it was not. That's great stuff. Oh, dude. No, I appreciate you. Thanks for doing this. It's going to be fun. And we'll get started. Stephen Marche, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be with you.
So great to have you. Stephen, for our listeners who may not be familiar with you and your work, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm a writer from Canada, from Toronto. I write about whatever I fall in love with, that I become fascinated with. So I'm pretty incoherent as a person who writes. Like I wrote On Writing and Failure, which we're going to talk about, but I've also did The Next Civil War, a book about American politics that came out 2 years ago. And I've co-written a novel with Andrew Yang recently, and I've been working with AI a lot recently. And I'm also a journalist. I write for the New Yorker and the Atlantic and the New York Times and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, pretty incoherent personality. But on the other hand, I just write about what interests me.
That is awesome. I definitely want to get into On Writing and Failure. I think you started the book off with this great Voltaire quote. It's the little pocket pamphlets that need to be feared, not the big 1,000-page books. That book is just right on the money. It's almost like a book on resilience. No matter what you pick, life is going to smack you down, not appreciate you, try to hurt you, make you depressed, but just keep going. So I'd love to touch on that. Would love to touch on maybe a little bit of Shakespeare. I think doing some research, you might have done your PhD with Shakespeare. And then maybe how does someone get to the point where they're writing for the New York Times, the New Yorker, and the Atlantic? That is so impressive. So let's get to the book, my introduction to your work, On Writing and Failure. It's like a book-length essay. Like how many words? 20,000?
20,000. That's Dan's series. Like he has a series, but everything's called On Something. Like there's one called On Risk, and there's different ones. And they're all sort of very short. And they're also published pretty topically. Like they're published about 6 months after you've finished writing them, which makes a big difference. And I just love it. I love writing at 20,000 word length. I think it's one of the best forms to write in. And, I think readers love it too. I love it as a reader. I love a book that you can pick up and be done. Like that seems to me like it's great.
Those books and that Voltaire quote, I'm missing the first part, but it's not like the big, not the big tomes, but it's the pamphlets that start the revolution. What's that quote, the Voltaire quote you use?
It's from that series because he had this idea of like pamphlet series. And I think it's not the big volumes but he was talking about the encyclopedia. Like it's not the encyclopedia that's going to win. It's these little pamphlets that make the revolution. Right.
It is.
And it is true.
So if you look at the Federalist Papers, like John said, there's little pamphlets that during the Revolution that sparked the revolution in America. Like these weren't these 1,000-page books. They're just these little pamphlets that just spread through like wildfire, and they have these short, concise ideas that connect with people. And you can get through. You can read it, right? Like we all books. Like I bought a Napoleon book a couple years ago. I love the subject. It's this thick. I'm still reading it. Right. But like that little John Gordon book on leadership, I can read 3 times because it's 100 pages. You know what I mean? And
I honestly think there's this really weird thing with publishers where they feel like, and there are economic reasons for it, I assume, why they need that 80,000 word book. But like when you pick up any random piece of nonfiction in that form now, like the 65,000 word piece of nonfiction, the chances that it could be written quite easily in 20,000 words and lose nothing is very high. Especially all these books coming out about social media and stuff like that. I mean, not to criticize the writers because they're doing it for a reason, but the idea that if you took those 80,000 words and put them in 20,000, you'd have a way better book that would be much easier to read for everyone. You just couldn't charge $60 for it, I guess. I think as a reader, it's way better experience.
So true. A couple of weeks back, we had Guy Kawasaki on, who started Apple with Steve Jobs, and he had a book called Think Remarkable, and his books are known to be like under 200 pages. And he did like a business principle. If you get stuck, pivot and get up early. He goes, well, I just saved you 2,000 pages of business books right there with those 2 quotes, right? Yeah. So you mentioned the first job of a writer is to write. The second is to persevere. I found that so powerful. If you can add on from there.
One thing that you do learn as you mature, and I think one of the really interesting things about writing this book is like, it's not like people, like older writers, like you get to a point where you're successful and you feel like it's okay. Like I've met a lot of writers who are like successes by any measure, like reviews, money. I've met writers who've made hundreds of millions of dollars from this and they do not feel like they've arrived. Right. And so I think one of the things you do learn as you age a bit, I think, is that you kind of have to separate the writing practice itself from the career part of the practice, because they're really kind of unrelated. Like if you're out there submitting things and you feel like they're rejected and that actually gives you some kind of sense of what it just doesn't, that's not it at all. Right. And it can be very misleading. when you have something that doesn't go where you want it to go and you think, well, I shouldn't be writing, that's not true at all. I do think, like, when you look at literary history, like, all these writers came through many periods where they really basically thought it was over for them. And sometimes they just ended it. Sometimes they just ended their careers. And I think that's really, really incredibly normal.
You mentioned a couple stories in the book. Let's go with the one of the big ones, Hemingway. I think you might have mentioned something where someone asked he's such a successful writer, someone called his wife to cover a story, not him, and he like lost his mind. They got divorced or something, right?
That's a beautiful story. Did I put that one in the book? I'm not sure I did put that in the book.
I think I read that in other writing that you directed me towards that in one of your other writings.
Well, he was married to Martha Gellhorn, who was one of the top journalists of her generation. I mean, she was all over. She was like covering the Chinese Revolution. She was the nationalist war with China and Manchurian occupation. And she was a true wartime journalist elite, like one of the best that's ever done it. And they were living in La Finca in Cuba, which I've been to. And, this is one of the most beautiful spots on the earth. Like, there's a swimming pool outside where movie stars are swimming in it. Like, famously, who's the woman who was married to Frank Sinatra?
Oh my God, so many of them.
The really beautiful one, Lana Turner. Once there was like Lana Turner was swimming naked in his pool. He came out and saw that. And he said to the pool boy beside him, he said, make sure never to lose this water. Right. Like, he's living this, like, don't throw out this water. Like, we're going to keep this water. Like, he's like living this extremely glamorous life of tuna fishing. And then Life magazine calls Martha and says, we want you to go to Spain to cover a part of the Spanish Revolution. And she's like, I don't have anything to do it. And then she hangs up her phone, talks about it with Ernest. And then he gets the same call 10 minutes later, and he couldn't take it. He had to divorce his wife over that. I mean, that's some pretty pathetic, machismo. But also, it's like, she's Martha Gellhorn. Mm-hmm. Like, you knew that when you married her. Like, she is as good as it gets. Like, you're excellent, but like, there's always someone better than you. I don't know. I mean, to lose it over that is a bit. I don't think I put that in the book. Yeah. I put the stuff with F. Scott Fitzgerald in the book, though.
Yeah. That and like Herman Melville, like there's just so many stories. Like the Melville story. Could you share the Melville story about Moby? That's the worst one. Could you share that one? That one is crazy.
I mean, like, that's like a really specific form of torture, what Melville had to put up with, because like he wrote a piece of crap book, Typee, like his first book, and it was a bestseller. Like, I think it sold 17,000 copies or something like that, which at that time was very, very high. And then every book he gets better. Like, every book he writes better, and he starts writing like Moby Dick and Confidence Man and all this stuff. Each one sells less and less until like he's paying out of pocket. I mean, he lost money on the Confidence Man, right? Like, he had to pay money to the publisher for it to be printed, right? So, and then he quits, and then he like writes Billy Budd, which is taught in many high schools in the United States to this day, and it like has to wait in a bread box for I think it was 37 years for it to be published. Was it 27? I can't remember. A long time for it to be published. And he was just like, he was working as a customs officer, just got a day job, and he must have wondered what the hell was wrong with him. Like, very, very horrible. Like, that's like Greek god torturing kind of thing. Like, very, very horrible.
I mean, Moby Dick, is there more an epic novel? That's one of the most epic novels ever. You say Moby Dick, everyone knows what it is. And this guy can't even get paid for it. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. He cannot get paid for it. It sold, I think it was under 400 copies, right? And what's amazing is like Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. I didn't put this in there. I didn't put this in the book because I didn't actually know it when I wrote it. But Cormac McCarthy never sold more than 5,000 copies until he was 60, right? Like, I've held in my hand like a remaindered copy of the first edition of Blood Meridian, which is, to me, is a complete classic. Like, one of the great novels ever written. And, it did not sell out its print run of 1,000 copies.
Is that crazy?
So, yeah. I mean, so like, I think it's really important for kid writers to know this. This is not like, this is the norm. This is how things are for everyone. Right. So I think Melville's case is particular because, you sort of think like, well, when Moby Dick came around, they must have recognized in themselves that this was the American story, right? That this was like very profoundly American kind of narrative. But they didn't want it at all. They wanted fancy British sounding prose about flowery New York society that made them compete with Britain, right? Walt Whitman had to self-publish too, right? So it's very easy to sort of think in hindsight, but like it was very hard for these men.
One more famous writer, like James Joyce, could not make a living writing. You did a line that I listened to it 3 times on Audible. It has something to do with the naked footprint in the virgin sand. Like it's such a magical line, and they didn't think he could teach. Yeah, his line. Yeah, you quote his line, and he couldn't even get. They didn't think he could teach English, right? Somewhere in Italy or something like that.
He couldn't get a job teaching English as a second language at a technical college in Medina. Like, and like he'd already written like Dubliners and almost all of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, right? So you can imagine he sat a 3-day exam and then gave which, I mean, I'm assuming he passed, right? Like then you could just imagine these adjudicators in Italy who don't speak English coming to the guy and saying, sorry, like we don't think that you're competent to teach English at a college level. I mean, like how bizarre. The amazing thing was, like, I'd always kept these stories in my mind as sort of comfort things. And then when Dan called me, who's a publisher of Global Oasis, and wanted me to write it, I was like, well, I have these notes. And he was like, great. And I was like, I assumed that I'd sort of misheard things, or that things had been exaggerated, and that when I went and checked when I went and read the biographies and checked the history, it'd be like, it wasn't actually that bad. It was always way worse than I thought it was. Like it was always like, oh my God, like he gave this I'd heard this lecture before, and I was like, that's the lecture he gave, and they didn't hire him. And it was like, yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Another great line from the book that you write, you go, trying to find fulfillment in writing is like trying to learn how to fly by jumping off a cliff.
Yeah. I mean, writing is not fulfilling. It's a very, very odd thing that people think that writing is fulfilling. Like that it's not a path to fulfillment. It is not a path to happiness. It's not. Any more than like being a carpenter is a path to happiness.
Yeah, sure.
Or making a living is a path to happiness. Like, that's not how you get happy.
Yeah. There's a quote like, no one knows anything, where like you write that these, like, one, you talk about James Joyce, you talk about Herman Melville, how their amazing work wasn't even appreciated. Then you said, I fell on the floor. Anne Frank's diary was rejected 15 times by publishers.
Yeah. But
that's crazy.
I mean, that's a crazy one. Although imagine showing up and saying like, hey, I've got this diary of a 13-year-old girl who, and you can just see the meeting in the publisher's office. Like, first of all, she's 13. She probably can't write. Who gives a fuck about what any 13-year-old girl thinks anyway? Plus, it's super depressing. Do we want to do this? Like, and then of course they talk themselves out of it, right? Like, there's always good reasons not to publish a book, right? Because like there are lots of books out there that are way more likely to succeed than Anne Frank. I mean, Gone with the Wind got rejected like 35 times. When it sold like, I mean, some vast quantity of copies in the tens of millions. Like it was the biggest book in American life for a decade, right? And so it's like it's not actually surprising to me.
Yeah, I love the book. The book is like almost like a realistic guide. You use writing, but it's like what it takes to succeed in almost anything. Writing, it might be a little more pronounced, a little more intense version of being ignored or being rejected. But whatever you do, this book is such a great guide to whatever you do. Fill in the blank X. You're not going to be appreciated. You're probably going to be ignored. Even something with this little blog I started, right? I'm maybe about 150 episodes in, and my biggest fear was, people are going to laugh at me. And like, they're not going to laugh at you. They're going to ignore you. It's going to be apathy. No one's going to care.
Yeah.
99.99999% of the people are never going to listen. I'm afraid that I'm going to turn it on and everyone's going to listen and laugh, or they're like, wow, he sucks, or something like that. Like that. I think you write, the common way to destroy a writer is casual indifference.
Yeah.
And it's
well,
so
that's the
true.
most normal way.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the most normal way that it happens. And I mean, I don't think there's a single writer ever who has not had to overcome that. Right.
Mhm.
And not only that, I think they continue to have to overcome it. Right. Like, it's not like you get to a certain place and then the casual indifference is gone. Actually, it's always the shadow that hangs over people. But I always think, like, one of the things that people don't tell you about anything about life is that there's a huge gap between your action and its consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and there's a sort of thing that you're told, like, if you do things right, this will all work out for you. And I just think that's so lazy, because, like, look around you. That's not true.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's actually this huge gap between intention and action and consequence, and figuring out how to act well under those conditions is actually, that's the job of being a human. Right. And certainly, I think writing is exceptional in terms of failure because it requires so much of it. Right. Like, even like any book that you write, you're throwing out 90% of what you've written. Right. I think that's a sort of less, that happens less in other fields where you're just destroying like, you're cutting your material so much in writing that that you kind of know that everything you write is probably temporary. Right? That you're going to throw it out. And then, of course, the massive rejection. And then, of course, the sort of broader questions are also there. And, like, writing is one thing that people keep doing. Like, you know, if you have a music career that fails, like, you just stop being a band. Right? Like, that's not really what happens with writing. Like, people keep going. Often, you know, like, as I said, Cormac McCarthy's career he started to make money when he was 60. Right. So, like, there's, you know, that's a sort of different thing with writing too. But yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of advice out there that seems to be like, doesn't seem to take into account that you can do everything right and it will not work out. And that just seems to me like adulthood to know that.
Yeah. It's not like you struggle, you fail, but then you're going to succeed and be on top of the mountains. A lot of times you struggle, fail, and you just stay struggle and fail. You just struggle and fail. It doesn't mean you're going to be on top of the mountain at some point.
But also, like, when you succeed, success is temporary.
Yeah.
Right.
So like, fleeting.
Like success is, that's the other thing. It's kind of like, they kind of act like if you do everything right, you'll succeed and then you'll be a success. And it's like, that's actually not how it works at all. Like, you would be amazed at the people that I know who really consider themselves failures, who have succeeded, because you don't see their failures, right? Like, you don't see the movie deals that don't work out, and the opportunity, the things that almost happened for them that would have made them absolutely gigantic that just fizzled out at the last minute. No one ever sees that stuff, and so it's and then of course no one ever talks about it either, right? Yeah. So it's a different kind of thing.
There's one story about, it's a female author, and I forget her name. You tell a story about a female author in the book where she was still, like, wasn't confident in herself either, where someone's like, oh, I published this essay. And they're like, I published the same essay.
Well, that was Margaret Atwood.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, I mean, yes.
Like, I mean, and I'm in Canada. Like, Margaret Atwood is like, she's going to be on the money someday. Right? Yeah. Like, she's already on a stamp. Like, you know, it was a friend of mine who was like they were at some party and he was like trying to make conversation. He said, like, you know, I wrote this piece in the New York Times about Orhan Pamuk. And she was like, well, you know, I've also written for the New York Times. And it was like hilarious to us because it's like, well, you're fucking Margaret Atwood. Like, what do you expect? Like, yeah, of course you've written for the New York Times. You've also, like, written The Handmaid's Tale. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but the thing that's amazing is that Margaret Atwood got this book and wrote an extremely glowing review of it, right? Because, like, she said it was one of the top 3 books about writing that she'd ever read, which I'm very proud of because I have a lot of admiration for Margaret Atwood, right? Yeah. But it goes to show that, like, she doesn't deny those feelings, right? Like, that's how she feels.
Yeah.
Right. And there's nothing like there's no amount of success that you can get that like she wakes up every morning, I'm sure, and wonders why I haven't won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, right? Sure, and absolutely.
Like, so everyone has their thing.
Here's a question. There's so many people that go into depression, like writers that are depressed, miserable.
Yeah.
Do you think miserable people are attracting to writing, or does writing cause people to be miserable? What do you think?
There was one study that I looked at where 18%, this is 18% of all the poets reviewed in the New York Times book review from like 1967 to 1982 or something had committed suicide.
Whoa.
Right. So like, I mean, it was a staggering number. Like it was just totally out of control. And I was like, I mean, as I say in the book, like, I think depression in this business is a bit like taking care of your hands when you work in a sawmill. Mm-hmm. Like you have to like actually prepare, like people lose their hands working in a sawmill. Like you have to be really careful not to lose your hands. And I think similarly, when you're writing, like you have to treat depression like an occupational hazard, right? Because it's very easy to get, like people are rejecting your language all the time, right? And so you need to kind of find a way around that. And I think whether sad people are attracted to writing or writing makes them sad, there's definitely a part of the writing process, I think, is struggle. Like I think that's and the sense of being misunderstood, and that you have to make yourself understood. I think that's one of the most powerful parts driving the urge to write. That I've been misunderstood. I'm going to make myself understood, but I'm still misunderstood. Right? And that, so I think that's natural.
You said this in the book. Here's a question. What did you mean when you said the quality of your writing has very little effect on your success of your career, but it's the only thing that matters?
I really believe that what we're out here hunting is insight in language, right? Like that's what we're out here for, is those powerful moments of connection over time and distance that only writing can provide, and which, like where you're reading poets who've been dead for 1,000 years and you know just what they felt. Right. That's a magical thing. And even though I think of this book as a very cynical, like it's a hard-headed book, right? Like even borderline cynical, like that value is very real to me. Like it's not like, I think that is the whole point of doing this. There's no point in doing this unless we're out there looking for that. Like if you're looking for money or fame or anything, there's a million better ways to get it than writing. So that search for that connection, I think, is the only thing that really matters. But on the other hand, I mean, if you've been writing for a while, you know that, like, the best thing I ever wrote was a novel called Love and the Mess We're In, which was published by a small press in Nova Scotia that, probably maybe as many as 2,000 people have read it. And then things that I've written in an hour will be read by tens of millions of people for a newspaper. Right. Yeah. And that's just the reality. Like that's not anybody's fault or like a bad system or something like that. Yeah. That's just the very nature of this enterprise, right? And so I think the real strength that's required here is to stay focused on what really matters while trying to play this game, right? While trying to survive in this game and not losing yourself in the process.
Not losing yourself in the process. And how don't you lose yourself in the process when you spend exponentially more time on that novel that you just objectively say, this is my best work. And you say like 2,000 people saw it. And then you wrote something in an hour, maybe after you dropped your kids off at school before dinner, and you put it to the New Yorker or the New York Times, and 10 million people read it like in a couple of days. Like, how's that make you feel? That's crazy.
Well, I admire the writer's craft, right? And I think genuinely, without lying, I've always felt that no matter what the assignment, I want to bring my best version of that to whatever it is, right? So like if it's like literally, and I think that is one thing that if I were to give anybody any career advice, which I don't really do, as you know, in the book, like it's not really a career advice kind of book, but like, to me, that is the absolute key, is to do your best work for everything. I mean, I got a job as an Esquire columnist because somebody had me write a blog post for 300 words that I did very, very meticulously. And David Granger at Esquire saw it and decided to have me on as a columnist, right? Like, I think you don't know where your language is going, right? That's part of the whole nature of the writing process. So in truth, it's kind of a luxury. I do what I want to do. So if I decide I'm going to write an avant-garde novel that I'm going to publish with a small press in Canada, I just do it. I don't not do things because they're not going to pay. I do things, I do what I want to do. But any task that I'm given, I try to do as well as I can, right? And to the fullest of my abilities. And then the rest is pretty much totally out of my control. Right? So that's like, I would say that, you know, how it makes me feel is like, well, these are kind of the terms that this happens in. It's it's one of those things, like, if you start thinking about it, you'll just drive yourself crazy. So, and also, you know, after a while, you don't really know where your books go. You don't know what happens to your stuff. You don't know who's reading it. I don't know that some guy in Philadelphia is listening to my book 3 times on Audible. Like, so you have to kind of trust that there's this kind of, and you know, the reason I know that is because the same thing happens with me with books, right? Like, I something hits me and I'm there with it, and I don't, you know, like, maybe I'll reach out to an author, but I probably should more. But like that kind of, but often they're dead or whatever. You know, like,
it's hard to reach out to them.
And so it's it's hard to reach out to them. But like, there's a kind of, you have to ignore the results of things. There's a line from Fabius, the great Roman general who beat Hannibal, and was like probably the greatest general of the Roman Empire, or the Roman Republic rather. And he said, "Results are the teachers of fools." And I so believe that. The longer I live, the more I believe that. Like, results are the teachers of fools.
That is such a I never heard that line before. And when you're speaking too, it reminds me so much. I love Stoic philosophy, and Meditations is a book I've read so much. And it's so much that you're speaking of. You control the process, but we don't control the outcome. Like it's not like things will happen to us, and we just have to learn it. We control our response, not what happens to us, right? And it's so stoic.
Correct. Yeah, but I think like that's the writing thing. I think writing is kind of an extreme example of it.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's so nakedly true, right? Where it's like, you know, the best writers are not the most successful writers. We all know that.
Sure.
Everyone knows that. Like, and you have to kind of hold it in mind, or else you really will you'll just stop writing. You know, like, you have to keep the notion of some kind of value external to fortune, or else. But also, you know, I just think there's one of the beautiful things about this rise of Stoicism, and that it's not afraid to deal with the fact that luck has so much to do with everything. Yeah. Right. And and that's a venue for compassion. Yeah. Right. Because it's like, when you see people high, low, whatever, like, that's not necessarily their internal reality being expressed. Like, everyone treats it like that. But, you know, time and chance has its way with everyone. If you know that about yourself and you know it about other people, I think it's just more civilized. It's a much more realistic way to take people.
So true. How about this? If you wouldn't mind, let's touch on creativity a little bit. You mentioned like your process. Sure. So like in Esquire, you wrote the 1,000 words about culture articles. Say you write a 1,000-word article, and you mentioned so much of what you write, you just like first 500 words are garbage. You never use them. How many words do you got to write to get that 1,000-word article that you're happy with?
Well, that was a 1,000-word column in a glossy magazine, when, you know, like, the back cover of Esquire would regularly sell for several $1 million.
Okay.
Right? So we're talking about I mean, that's fundamentally a different era than now, but that process was literally, so I would have meetings with the editors. They had a team that prepared a Zeitgeist list, which was everything that was going to happen in popular culture in 3 months. Wow. And every book, every news, every television show, everything. And like, one of the things I learned doing that column is that American popular culture is as manufactured as like Monsanto wheat. Wow. Like, it's a fully industrialized process, and that's totally predictable, right? Like, you can know what's going to happen in 3 months in pop culture, like what's going to be big and what's going to be small. And So then we would discuss which topic I wanted to do. I mean, literally, they would have things like, I wanted to write about Grand Theft Auto 4 in the early days. And they were like, great, why don't you fly into New York tomorrow? We'll put you up in a hotel. You can play the game. We'll have somebody come by. You can play the game all day and then just fly home at night. And like, so they literally, like, there money was no issue. Like when you were dealing, those days are gone. So I would then experience the culture, or I would get advanced screenings of things. And, you know, cultural commentators, I mean, it was sort of before the internet swallowed everything, but like, if I wanted to see a movie, they would rent out, I would have a movie theater show it, and I would be me in the theater in Toronto.
Wow.
Right? Like, and like that, I mean, that didn't happen all the time, but that regularly happened. Right. Wow. And so then I would see this stuff, and then I would write my 1,000 words, and it would probably go through 5 or 6 drafts. Okay. Where I was working with one editor, and it would be a truly savage editorial process. Like, wow. every word was considered to the end of it being able to be considered. Right. So that was a highly specific process, I would say. They taught me how to write. Yeah. Right.
Did you get better? If someone is that micromanaging over you, do you become like a more daring writer or more hesitant writer when you know that editor's just going to sit there and just bleed over everything? Like, but
that editor wants you. The thing that's, when you have an editor that blows you away, that's easy. With those editors were like, you're not daring enough. You need to go away and rethink all of this because it's not interesting enough. And it needs to be more aggressive, and you need to be more of a statement. And that's a lot harder to write. Just trust me. Like, if somebody says to you, you need to cut this sentence, write a new one, be clearer, that's easy. When someone says, this whole thing bores me, you need to go and really rethink this whole thing and like come up with some new insights. I mean, that's like a week of your life. Like, you have to go and like try and figure out what it is. Right. And so that was I did get better at it, like after 8 years, but yeah, like because you were fighting about literally everything, like you'd fight about like clause positions and rhythms of sentences. Like, you'd have ideas fights, but then you'd also have like really granular stylistic arguments, like about sentence variability in second nut graphs and stuff and stuff like this. So it was a very intense workshop. Let's put it that way. And all the time, right? Like every month there was a new one.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. That's got to be exhausting. I'm exhausted. Listen, that's got to take a lot of mental and physical energy to go through something like that.
Well, yeah, but on the other hand, I was paid enough from that one column to support myself.
Wow, there you go. That's probably
right? Like you know,
doing what you love.
Right? Like that was like as a basis. Like, you know, that like it was internationally syndicated. It was a huge amount of work, but on the other hand, that's the work that I absolutely love. Mm-hmm. Like, fighting over sentence structure. I mean, I wish I had a bunch of editors now who wanted to go over the rhythm of my sentences in minute detail, like and fight over like how long should an apposite clause be before, you know. I actually think it's one of the things I'm sad about for younger writers than me is that they'll never have that. Like, they'll never have someone, and you know, like he was my guy. Like, we would go out drinking in New York. Like, he was like, you know, I would call him at like 9 p.m. Like, we were in each other's lives very intensely during that whole process.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. How about, you mentioned writing. One, your book is probably the best short book I've ever read on writing. I heard you say there's no such thing as required reading. Where'd you come up with that? What's your thought process there?
Well, I mean, I don't think, I think you're supposed to read the stuff that resonates with you.
Okay.
I sort of think sometimes required reading, people are like, you know, these are the classics that you need to read. And I don't really, I mean, one of the things, I'm very attracted to classic literature, right? Mm-hmm. Like, my PhD's in Shakespeare, but I read a lot of like Ovid. Like, I read that for pleasure, which obviously that's not usual, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's not typical. But on the other hand, like, I think, the point of this is pleasure on
Yeah.
some level.
Yep.
I think for writers, it's very, like, if you want to be a professional novelist, there's a ton you have to read. That is absolutely required reading. If you're a novelist and you haven't read Dickens, or you have, like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Like, don't you want to know how to do this? Like, that, those are the people who know how to do it. And so that's a sort of different matter. But, like, yeah, I don't think anyone's really. I think it's more important that people find their own time to read things, so that when they hit you as they're supposed to.
Yeah. Because what hits you in your 20s isn't going to hit you when you're 30, 40, or 50, right? Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so true. How about books on writing? If you had to hand off a couple books on writing, what are some of the ones that you'd hand off?
Well, I never. I mean, I wrote this book kind of because I don't like any of the books on writing. Like,
Yep.
I don't like. Like, it's not like. And this is nothing against, like, On Writing by Stephen King, because it's a really fun book. But, like, if you woke up at 22 and got a $400,000 advance on your first novel,
Yeah.
like, that's just a very different reality than like, almost any writer inhabits, right?
Yep.
So, like, often these on writing books are like, the ones that are obviously Drunken Way, I think, is very good. I think there's, one of the more recent ones that I really, really liked was Reality Hunger by David Shields.
Really?
Which was probably the last book that I read that I actually changed my writing practice, where I was like, his argument is that nonfiction is better than fiction as the defining genre of the time. And I'd written a lot of novels up till then. I published 2 novels last year. It's not like I don't write fiction, but I'm really convinced that the genre, like, if you look at this little book we're talking about now, like, that's experimental and interesting and stylish in a way that I don't think you could get away with in a piece of fiction anymore. Right. And also, it's much more general. Like, the thing about nonfiction that I really love is, like, my accountant, I was just doing my taxes because it's April, and my accountant had read a couple of my books. And there was the plumber who came in to fix the toilet. He'd read a bunch of things that I'd written in Times. And that was always what I wanted, right? It was to write really, really good things, like, well written, that were like fully informed by writing, but for people. Right? Like, not for like a little specialist subset of, like, little literary priests.
Yeah.
Out there talking about some, like, little obsession of theirs, like, where ordinary people were reading it and experiencing it. And I think that nonfiction, that's the way to do that. That's the form that does that. And that's, and David Shields, that book, Reality Hunger, I mean, that was the one where I was like, you're right. Like, that's just right.
That's awesome. Here's a couple quick.
Also, the thing is with Reality Hunger is, like, you can be more aggressive in nonfiction now than you can be in any other. Like, in fiction, you're not getting published if it's weird.
Okay.
Like, but you can write really unusual things in nonfiction and have it find a market. And I think that's exciting to me.
We mentioned Cormac McCarthy a few minutes ago. Okay, so if they were playing each other in a game, Blood Meridian versus The Road, who you taking?
I mean, they're both total masterpieces. They're his 2 best novels.
So
I mean, I think I'd probably have to take Blood Meridian just because of the scope and the grandeur of it. Like, I mean, I think that is the best treatment of violence in writing that's ever happened. So, I mean, I think it would probably have to be Blood Meridian. But great. I mean, The Road if it was the only book he'd ever written, he'd still be one of the.
Yeah, it's crazy. That book is crazy. And then you got what's the other one? All the Pretty Horses, right? I mean, it's just.
Well, those ones I like less, like the trilogy, All the Pretty Horses, Cities of the Plain, and The Crossing. I mean, they're very good, but it's funny. But, like, Cormac McCarthy, like, he got successful off of his worst books, for sure.
Wow.
Right, like, when he did like little cowboy things that were, like, basically like Lonesome Dove, but a little more gritty. Like, that's when he took off. Blood Meridian, like, that was which is a total supreme class. Like, no one was interested in that book, Right.
That's great.
So it's, I think, he's a very specific case of like the worse the book he wrote, the more successful it was.
That's wild. No, thanks for sharing that. That's so cool. How about this? Most writers are big routine people. What's your routine, either to start the day or end the day? How do you get your mojo going?
Okay, you asked. So the fact that this question is going to be boring, the answer is going to be boring,
Okay.
is not my fault. But this is the kind of thing that I talk about at parties, and it's sort of like when LA people start talking about their diets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like it's definitely like weird stuff. I fully acknowledge, but like, so I have very profound feelings about sleep.
Okay. Yeah.
And I treat sleep with the most extreme seriousness. So I will typically, like, what happened was that I was writing a column for Esquire, and while I was writing the column, they also wanted me to write 3 days a week for their blog. And then I also got a 2-book deal at the same time. And this would have been like almost 10 years ago. And so I literally had a moment where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do the work that I'm going to do. Like, I actually went and studied concentration. I went and did this Harvard woman who'd done this work on concentration and work, and like how, and it was the most fascinating thing because she said the most that anyone can concentrate for in a continuous period is 52 minutes. And she said, if you get 5 hours of concentration a week, you will be like Leonardo da Vinci. Right? Like it sounds crazy, but it's not. People confuse time on task with work. And it's something we've inherited from our industrial past. Like my grandfather, when he worked in a factory, like it was the amount of time that he worked in the factory that mattered. Right? That was like his, but that's when you're doing creative work, that's not it at all. Like what actually matters is the sentences that you write that you keep. And those only, like, it's not just amount of writing. It's like the ones that are good enough for you to keep. So that's why I will typically go to bed around 8:30. I will wake up around 4. I will work continuously until my kids wake up. Then I will go for a run. Then I will have as long a nap as that I can have after lunch. I'm up to about an hour and a half on the nap, but if I could, I'm constantly trying to sleep more. Like I'm trying to get to 10. I treat sleep like athletes treat food. Like I need to consume as much as I can get into me. I would. If I could sleep 10 hours a day, I would. I'm not quite there yet, but and I think of that as my work. Like some people think that's like, oh, it's a lecture, you get a nap. It's like no. The nap is what allows me to be. I mean, I published 3 books last year, and the only reason that I was able to do that was by very, very actively being conscious of sleep. So then I'll sleep, then I'll make a big dinner, then I go to bed. But I'm very, I'm very religious about that. Like I definitely have a practice around a ritual. I mean, I don't know if it would be a ritual. I more feel like I'm training.
Yeah.
I exercise every day. I don't drink heavily except on occasions, but like, cause alcohol is the real killer. It's especially as you age, like my father-in-law, who is one of the greatest journalists in Canadian history, he told me that when you hit 60, you can either choose drinking or writing. Wow. But I already feel like he said, like it's one or the other. Like you can't drink and write afterwards. And if you look at people's careers, like that's exactly what happens. Like you either stop drinking at 60 and write. I can already feel it approaching 50. Like if I'm hungover, I'm not writing anything.
That so goes against the artist who's boozed up and their best work comes when they're drunk or they're high. Right? That totally goes against it. Yeah.
Zero evidence of that. Like if you look, Germaine Greer actually once wrote a famous essay where she went through all the math. Like when Faulkner was drinking, I mean, he famously said, at one martini, I'm good. 2 martinis, I'm great. 3 martinis, I'm William Faulkner. But like, if you actually look at his work, like, when he got drunk, he had to move to Hollywood because he couldn't really write fiction anymore. And then he got sort of cleaned up, like not really, but he sort of got himself together when he started writing again. Like Well, I mean, it's just it's common sense. Like, how many alcoholics have you known? Like, I've known a ton. And guess what? The booze takes everything. Like, it takes everything. It takes the writing just like it takes everything else. It's not. It shouldn't come as a surprise.
And Hemingway, right? I mean, Hemingway that didn't help him either, right? The drinking, right?
No, I mean, he was, he was such a wild man, but he also had, he would consciously write bad books too, right? I mean, that's what he told F. Scott Fitzgerald. He said it's good to write a bad book every now and then, right? Like he was mass producing a lot of stuff. He was also like a functioning journalist, right? So like a lot of that stuff is very poor that he was producing, and he was just drunk all the time. He cleaned up to write Old Man in the Sea, and you can tell.
My family, we went to Sun Valley, Idaho for a vacation a couple of years back, and we're walking around. And someone goes, Hemingway's grave is right around the corner. We're like at a coffee shop. So we drove around and found it. And on his grave were like 2 or 3 whiskey bottles. Like people leave whiskey bottles on his gravesite.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah.
Funny, I would never leave whiskey for him. I mean, I would have definitely picked rum. I mean, what he was drinking was rum. I mean, really? He was a rum drinker.
Was he? Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess that's because I saw him all over Cuba, where it's all obviously
okay. Sure.
But even the cocktails that he drank in Paris, rather champagne. I mean, I would never think of him as a whiskey drinker. Not like F. Scott Fitzgerald or something like that, who is definitely a whiskey drinker.
A couple fun questions to wrap this up. This is great. How about this? We talked about the creative process, writing, all the famous writers that struggled. If you could have everyone listening, especially young aspiring writers, take just one lesson away from everything we discussed, what would that lesson be?
I think the lesson would be this, because I don't think old writers have wisdom. I don't think young writers should listen to old writers. Like there's not a lot of experience is very overvalued in this business, and I'm sure young writers know a lot of things that I don't know, and that and certainly I know they know a lot more than older than people than me. But I would say this, that if you think that you're going to struggle and then reach a place of safety and success, and then you'll be recognized, and then everything will be fine, and all this struggle will be rewarded, that's not coming. If you want to do this, you have to understand that the struggle is the cost of admission. Like it is the price of doing business. And you have to either, figure out a way to not have it hurt as much, or you have to just accept that that's the spiritual condition in which you're going to live to do it. Because you're, and I think people make bad career decisions because they think, I mean, I've seen a lot of writers try to write for prizes, and it's just insanity. Like they think they're gonna win the Pulitzer or whatever, and then they'll be fine. And it's like, no, that's not how this works at all. You have to make peace with that torment, or just don't do it, because that it's never going away. That would be my incredibly cheerful piece of advice. It's just so
so uplifting.
I wonder why I'm not on the speaker circuit. You know what I mean?
I starts crying. I love it. The struggle is the cost of admission. That's a great pearl I wrote down. How about this? As you look out to the year ahead, what's the most exciting project you're working on now?
Well, I'm working on a book about celebrity culture that I've been working on for a long time, since 2008. So I'm hoping to finish that. And I have some AI related projects that I've been working on for a long time that I'm interested in. And, it's a very, I've been doing things. Being a journalist is really fun. I was just in a car chase with the cops doing a piece about speed racing in Toronto. And it's a blast to go out there and chase bad guys down the highway. It's fun.
Great. That's awesome. Just two fun questions to wrap up here. Stephen, if you could spend a day with anyone, alive or dead, famous or not famous, who would you spend the day with?
Well, I mean, I did do my PhD on Shakespeare, so it would be him. Yeah. Right? I have so many questions. So I think, There are other ones that would probably be more. I mean, I would just have to. I think that was the only answer that makes sense to me.
If you could ask two questions, one, if you could ask Shakespeare any question, what would it be? And what would you do with them? You spend the day with them.
Oh, I'd have like 500 questions. I'd be like, were you reading Montaigne before 1599 or after 1599? Like, did you perform as the ghost in Hamlet, or was that a rumor that went around? Like, did you ever meet any of like John Donne or the Queen or any of these people? Like, like honestly, it would be like boring. It wouldn't be any grand spiritual questions. It wouldn't be like, how did you come to write this stuff? It'd be like, did you actually meet John Donne at any point? Like, it would be boring technical stuff like that. Because when you're a scholar dealing with these like tiny little questions, you become like, if only I knew that, I would be able to make so much more sense of things. Yeah. But we know nothing about their lives, those people.
Wow, that's crazy. What would you do with them? You could bring them to the modern day. Where would you take them?
Ooh. Well, I mean, I think my temptation would be to take him to New York. I think he'd want to see Hollywood. They're the inheritors of what he's doing. Right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
He'd want to go on like a Spielberg set.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what he'd want to do. Yeah.
That's so cool. In like a junior year of high school, I had a teacher that was so into Macbeth. We had a little play, and I had one line, and it's still in my head. It's Macbeth, Macbeth, fear Macduff, beware the faint of fife, dismiss me enough, something like that. With the Macbeth one, we read that nauseum, and I just a great play. That was my exposure to Shakespeare. Yeah. Where are you ranking Shakespeare's plays? What's your favorite one? Well, like half my dissertation was on Hamlet. Okay. So I'd probably put it at the top. To me, there's like, it's not necessarily like, I don't think I could rank them in order, but there's like tier A and tier B and tier C and bad ones. Yeah. I mean, tier A would be Macbeth, Lear, Othello, Hamlet, Antony and Cleopatra, Romeo and Juliet, Midsummer Night's Dream, Twelfth Night, Henry IV parts 1 and 2, Richard III, Tempest. Like you kind of forget about a play like The Tempest, and then you pick it up and you're like, oh my God, this thing is just unbelievable, right? Like, it's so well made. It's just so well made, and it has so many beautiful passages in it. But and then there's like the mid tier. I mean, even those ones are sort of good, like your Titus Andronicus and Winter's Tale, and sort of those ones. But I mean, I taught Shakespeare at City College in New York, and like, Macbeth, like, you can make that work for any student body. Like, everyone gets it. Yeah. You can teach that to anyone, anyone gets it. It's like that thing about the plumber and the accountant. Like, anyone can understand Macbeth. Anyone. Yeah. It's just so epic. No, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you. Last question. Stephen Marche, if you had to get a quote or a saying tattooed on your body, what would that quote or motto say? See, I think the fact that I could never have anything tattooed on my body is actually more revealing. Because, like, I don't think anything's permanent. I don't think any truth is permanent. I don't think and certainly I don't think I would want I don't think there's anything that I would want to associate with myself forever. I'm more interested in change, right, than that. And I guess maybe the line I would have tattooed on me is, the only thing that's permanent is change. Wow, that is so great. The only thing that is permanent is change. That is so good. I'd like to end with one of that's Seneca, I think. That's absolutely. No, Seneca. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very stellar. I want to end with one of your lines from On Writing and Failure. A line I just love. I think sums up the whole book. If you are writing, failing, submitting, and persevering, it's the only thing anyone can ask of even yourself. The guest is Stephen Marche. The book is On Writing and Failure. Pick yourself up a copy. Stephen, if people, first off, thank you. And if people are looking for you and what you do online, where can we find you? Well, I'm on Twitter and I have a website.
And those are probably the best ways to find out what I've done most recently.
Awesome. What I'll do is I'll put your Twitter and website. I'll link that and your books. And whenever you come up next, there's so much we didn't cover. I would love to have you back on when that celebrity thing comes out. Would love to have you back on.
Terrific. Okay,
awesome.
Great.
Stephen, hey, honor to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, man. It was great.
Take care.
Wonderful. All right.